Hi guys, Nate here from WASD20. Welcome back to my RPG class. This is a class called So You Want to Slay a Dragon. A class all about tabletop role-playing games that I teach here at the high school where I work. And this is vlog number 3 for 2018 and covering days 5 and 6, which is Friday and Tuesday because we didn't have winterim classes on MLK Day. So it was a long weekend, and boy did I miss RPG class. I was super excited to get back to it today, Tuesday. So we'll talk about what we did Friday and Tuesday. Friday, you may remember, and by the way, if you're new to this series, I recommend you go back and watch episode 1, and even my episode 1 from 2016, where you'll get a really good explanation of what the class is. But on Friday, we talked about violence and ethics. We discussed the homework that they had done a few days prior. Finally got some good discussion on that. Talked about just the notion of, what do our in-game actions mean for us in the real world? Whether this is a violent video game or whether it's a tabletop role-playing game, does that affect us? And if so, how? That was a good discussion. I think that students in my class were very thoughtful and had been thoughtful about it before I came along, and had some of them do have limits in terms of what sorts of games they will play. And yeah, I think it was overall pretty good. There was definitely some differing opinions on how much games, what we do in games, affect us in the real world. We talked about the notion of the magic circle. I wrote this article, and you can see down in the video description, I put a link to my RPG class website where you can see all the resources I use. Well, almost all of them. I need to add more, actually. But there is something that I wrote up mostly based on some of Kevin Scott's work. His book Of Games and God is a really good one for thinking about this sort of thing. And he talks about this idea that he got somewhere else, I think, from a psychologist maybe. Are games a magic circle in which what you do in game does not really affect what happens outside of the game, your life outside the game? And we all can, I think, agree with that to some extent. We can say, well, of course I wouldn't do this in reality. It's just a game. But I encourage students to not be so dismissive as to say that about everything that happens in a game. It's just a game, right? There are, I think, ways in which that notion is limited. And yeah, I think as an example, my character is backstabbed by another character. I can't help but feel something against that actual player who has done that or who's picked my pocket or whatever it might be. And I think most of the students agree with that. Yeah, we might get over it pretty quickly and be like, all right, you're still my friend. But you feel something. I think you would definitely feel something. I've felt things like that. And if you're honest with yourself, you probably have too. So another example might be a card game. I've played Phase 10, and my wife and I have actually gotten very angry at each other over what happens in a game of Phase 10 or, Settlers or whatever it might be, right? So I think we all have experiences like that. And so now you might say, well, what about the stories we tell in tabletop role-playing games? Do those really affect us? Obviously, that's different than an action. But I think that they can. And I think that's partially a good thing because it also means that they can have a powerful positive impact on us as well. We looked back at C.S. Lewis's thoughts. If you look up, if you just Google C.S. Lewis dipping into myth, there's a good article on his website where he wrote about some of this stuff and just the power of myth, the power of stories, and how it can enrich our lives. And dipping into myth can change our present reality in a positive way and change the way we look at the world. So I think that's great. But it also means that there's possibly some bad that could come from dipping into certain things. And so I encourage students to think about that, and maybe we all have different limits, different preferences, different tastes, but to be sensitive to those things and maybe try to think about, well, what are my limits and what things don't I enjoy and what things do I enjoy? What things enrich my life and what things maybe bring me to a place that I don't want to go? So yeah, that was a good discussion. Then, that was about 30 minutes, I would say. I wanted to keep it shorter, but there was a lot of good comments from students. Then we checked in with how they're doing in their D&D 5e games. This was day 3 of playing D&D 5e. 3 groups were still playing Lost Mine of Phandelver. One group who had the TPK was playing the Sunless Citadel from the Tales from the Yawning Portal, and they did pretty well with that. Had a lot of fun. Didn't get real far, so I'm not sure if they'll want to continue that or not. But that was good. Then we had playtime for over 2 hours. They played, and they had a great time. It's great seeing these groups come together. These groups that I formed to try to mix them up, and they're really bonding well, and they're really enjoying each other and just getting along. I'm sure it's not perfect, but overall, these groups, you can tell they're having a blast, and a lot of them I think want to continue beyond class. I even heard some people saying, "So what are you doing tomorrow on Friday?" Asking about Saturday. Hey, maybe we could play tomorrow, right? I don't know if they actually did. I don't think so. But then I brought them back in just for a few minutes at the end because I wanted to get some feedback on a Google form. I will actually show you guys here. See if I can pull this up here. Display. There we go. Okay. So this was the question. I said we are definitely going to cover general game master tips and session planning, how to plan a session, like a homebrew session, not a module, but your own session. I said, what other topics? And these are the ones they chose. I said you can choose more than one. That's why we have more than 20. Campaign design was at the top. Next up was world building. And then we have mapping a game world, designing interesting encounters, making interesting NPCs, improvisation. So yeah, a few other things here. But yeah, that's going to help me kind of help guide what I want to make sure we cover before the end of the class for sure. So that was good. And some of that stuff is in the works for, especially Thursday is a day when we'll be doing a lot of that sort of thing. I'm going to move you guys over to day 6 here, Tuesday. We had 20 minutes of work time on their RPG system presentations where they're all doing a different RPG system. Today, after they were very productive on that, we heard from Dread and Call of Cthulhu groups, and they did a great job. They set a high bar for how these presentations should go in terms of just being very thorough and covering here's the basic rules, here's the history of it, the flavor, the setting, etc. Did a really good job with all of that, and that was fun. 2 very interesting systems that I think are important ones. Dread, because I think it's just extremely unique. And Cthulhu is just, it's one of the oldest ones, and it's a staple of the tabletop role-playing game scene. Then we got into the Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars systems, going over the basic rules of these systems. We've got Force and Destiny, we've got Edge of the Empire, and Age of Rebellion. So what I did is I asked for Game Master volunteers, and I got 4 volunteers, thank goodness. It took a little bit of coaxing, but we got 4 volunteers, so I was really relieved. And I think we got some good people to do that. I sent those GMs out with, not the rule book, but actually the adventure book. And I said, you guys go get started reading these because you're going to be running this game tomorrow. And I don't want you to have a ton of homework. So get a start now. Start reading through the book. They're about 25, 30 pages. So, it's a bit of work for them. But hopefully they're enjoying that tonight. And I had the rest of the class stay in here. And I said, every group, grab a rule book. We had 4 groups, and I said, you guys probably can't see it down there, but I will try to move the camera. Yeah, you can't see it real well. I'll just read it. So we had one group covering the dice pool and narrative dice, just how do these dice work, these funny looking symbols and all this that we see on these things. And then group B was the force die and destiny points. Group C was combat and range bands, and they also talked about initiative and just kind of basic combat stuff. And then letter D was soak, strain, and wounds, and also death. So the groups, I said, you have 20 minutes, and you need to teach the class. So go nuts, read these rule books. I gave them some YouTube resources too. There's some good explanations of stuff on YouTube. And they did a really good job. I think that I'm really happy I did this as opposed to what I've done in the past where I just try to cover some of the basic rules with them. This they took some ownership of. They probably learned a lot better because they had to learn it well enough to be able to teach and explain it to their peers. And it gave the GM some time to work out there on their own thing. And then brought it back together, and we all got to learn some of the basic rules. And it was a collaborative thing. We all kind of contributed. I told them it's not a formal thing, so I can give some input, and others who, someone else read a little about that, and they can add this other thing. And it was really good. So that was a successful teaching moment where, you know, I had the students teaching each other. It's always good to do that sometimes as a teacher and not have me be the center. History lesson. We covered that. I had to write that in later because I had forgotten that, oh yeah, I said I would do that today. So we covered the moral panic of the 1980s, the satanic panic it is sometimes called. We watched a video from the New York Times. A lot of you have probably seen it. It's pretty popular on YouTube. I think it's like New York Times Retro or something like that, called the satanic panic. You can just find that. Go search for New York Times satanic panic on YouTube and it will come up. It's a really good video. It covers some of the basics that I had in my slides, but then I just use my slides as kind of emphasis, you know, just say, so just to review what happened here and why D&D got this reputation and why there was this moral panic surrounding Dungeons and Dragons. And so yeah, covered the basics of the MSU incident with Dallas Egbert, I think it was named Dallas Egbert Jr. or something like that. And then talked about some of the suicides and other murder cases that people theorized and jumped to the conclusion that maybe D&D was involved here, which was all a little bit ridiculous and very unscientific, but had the effect of putting D&D out there in the spotlight, and it became very, very popular during this time. Because if you tell teenagers they shouldn't do something and that it's dangerous, they're going to want to do it. So that was good. We also got into some of the positive press that D&D got too, not just the negative. You know, things like the scene in E.T. It's not all negative press. That scene is not like particularly positive. It's just, it is, right? It exists and it's fine. And then also like Gary Gygax showing up on The Simpsons and things like that. And basically the D&D becoming a household name in a way. The cartoon, we didn't watch any of that, but, you know, showed some pictures and yeah, maybe we should. Maybe we should take a lunch break and watch some of the old D&D cartoon. I don't know. So that was good. Pretty brief, probably about 20, 30 minutes on that. And then I usually would include some stuff on the later 80s, and normally I would include in the same set of slides, like the fall of Gary Gygax and TSR losing D&D, and it started to get into Wizards of the Coast ownership. But I stopped short of that just because we watched this video from New York Times, which was about 10, 15 minutes, I think. So then we covered some basic game mastery tips and got mostly into talking about session prep. And how do you prep? And what do a DM's prep notes look like? So I showed some of my actual prep notes from sessions of games. And that was really good. And I see the janitor coming here. He might be shutting me down here. But yeah, overall it was really good, and we've got lots of good stuff coming up. Tomorrow we're playing some of these Fantasy Flight Star Wars games. So yeah, move the camera here. There we go. So those will be good, and yeah, more good stuff coming later in the week. So I want to thank you guys for joining me. Thanks for all the positive comments and support and feedback. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below. Always great to hear from you. And yeah, everybody take care. You'll see me again very soon.